Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check the link above to my Patreon page. So I'm here with round 1 of a Modern Friendly League. Mono Blue has been feeling really great since I've switched back to it. Let's go ahead and see how the opening hand looked. So the opponent kept their 7, and this is a really beautiful hand for us, so an easy keep. Creeping Tar Pit, so some kind of blue-black control deck. It could be Esper. It's more likely Grixis, but there are some random Esper control decks around. So we're really happy actually to see this opening because we've got Cavern of Souls. We know this deck is going to run some number of counter spells. AEther Vial helps us with that as well. Cursecatcher also helps us in the early game, defending against any kind of spot removal. All right, another Reejerey. With access to AEther Vial and Cavern of Souls and this island here, we just really wanted to draw gas there. Opponent plays Field of Ruin, which is kind of cool for us because it means that, well, it seems to imply that they're low on colored mana, which is going to make this Spreading Seas more impactful. Like if we can take them off black mana for a little while with Spreading Seas while developing tempo with AEther Vial, feels pretty good. And if the opponent has something like a Mana Leak in hand, Cursecatcher can protect our Spreading Seas, help it resolve. So AEther Vial takes up to 1. We draw a Master of Waves for the turn. We will now play our Cavern of Souls, try to cast Spreading Seas. Opponent lets it resolve. No need to Vial in the Cursecatcher and sack him. And another Island Walk Lord. So we're drawing super duper well right now. Of course, another land or two would be welcome. End step, Thought Scour. I'm going to go ahead and open up this graveyard since it's probably going to be relevant. So we see a Lightning Bolt, and we know the opponent is on Grixis. So hang on. Okay. So another Field of Ruin. Now, at this point, they can sack a Field of Ruin to take us off of Cavern of Souls and go get some black mana, but they have to sort of take their turn off to do that. All right, so we get to replace it with an island. I do have 11 islands in the deck, so any number of Field of Ruins we're going to be able to grab an island off of. The opponent does get a swamp, and they're going to Inquisition us. Now, do you guys use Cursecatcher in this spot, or do we keep Cursecatcher as a beater next turn? In my opinion, we've got all of these really powerful creatures. Cursecatcher is going to get outclassed pretty quickly as the opponent continues to hit his land drops. So I'd rather Vial in the Cursecatcher and protect the other creatures in my hand. Yeah, it slows down our clock a little bit, but all of these cards in hand are going to be really valuable as the game goes on. All right, Cavern of Souls right on time, and that means we're going to want to play out a Reejerey to make full use of our mana. And then we'll just sit back on AEther Vial, see what the opponent does for their turn. So there is a mountain, and the opponent's going to pass their turn. So this is tricky for us. I mean, obviously, the default play is to activate AEther Vial and bring in an Island Walk Lord. However, the opponent is representing Kolaghan's Command, and if I activate AEther Vial, in response to the activation, the opponent could kill Reejerey and the AEther Vial, which is a massive blowout. So unfortunately, that actually takes me off of being able to activate AEther Vial right now. Instead, I'm going to go to my next turn. And what happens sometimes is the opponent will stop me during my upkeep and then use Kolaghan's Command, thinking that I don't have a 2-drop to play. Of course, in response to the Kolaghan's Command, I could bring in one of my Island Walk Lords, save the Reejerey. Unfortunately, the AEther Vial would still eat it, but we could save our powerful 3-drop Lord. So passing through the opponent's end step, the opponent appears to not have any plays during my upkeep. We drew another Cursecatcher. Let me pause for a second. Actually, I think I'm going to run out Cursecatcher first. What happens a lot of times is, even if the opponent can comfortably pay for Cursecatcher, you can often get them to respond to you casting the Cursecatcher by playing whatever it is that they're going to play. So let's go ahead and try to get some of that information out now. Now remember, we didn't bring in a 2-drop at the opponent's end step, so they might well be thinking that we don't have like any Island Walk Lords in hand. So here's the Cursecatcher. I'm going to target the Cavern of Souls here. Let's see what the opponent does in response. So again, even though they have mana to pay, they feel threatened by the Cursecatcher, and they're going to go for the Reejerey. Now, of course, going for the Reejerey could also indicate that they don't want me to get any more tapping and untapping value out of Reejerey, in which case they probably should have just used the Terminate during my upkeep, or during their end step, or even during their main phase. That's something that opponents consistently sort of misplay on. They let Reejerey survive long enough to give us value. So here I get to untap my Cavern of Souls, again getting value from the Reejerey, and that will just let me follow up with another Reejerey. And we can sort of sit back on AEther Vial and see what the opponent does. Okay, there they go. They've learned their lesson. They're going to bolt the Reejerey on their main phase. And it looks like we might be seeing a Delve creature. Let's see. Yep, here's a Tasigur, and at this point, the opponent has 2 bolts and a Terminate in the graveyard. Master of Waves has protection from all of those spells, so pretty happy to have the Master in hand. With the opponent tapped out, we're going to be able to actually swing for a substantial chunk of damage here. I'm going to bring in 1 Island Walk Lord, and then during my upkeep, I'm going to pause, bring in another Master of the Pearl Trident, and tick up the AEther Vial now to 3, so that next turn, even if I don't draw another land, we'll be able to deploy the Master of Waves with AEther Vial. Okay, Island Walk Lord in, and we'll tick up the AEther Vial to 3. Now, Harbinger's pretty good because these kinds of decks don't play a ton of threats, and in the case of Tasigur, they often have to delve to cast him, so bouncing Tasigur means that the opponent will have to delve into their graveyard even further. We get to swing for a healthy 6 points of damage right now with Island Walk, and just pass the turn back. Thought Scouring, we see another Terminate and a Cryptic Command hit the yard. The opponent does not get in with Tasigur. Alright, so finishing the plan that we started last turn, we're going to take AEther Vial up to 4. And we drew another Master of Waves, which is just perfect. It's all we can ask for, really. I'm going to get in just with the Cursecatcher here. The opponent's obviously representing some sort of removal, whether it's Snapcaster Terminate, Snapcaster Lightning Bolt. Well, Snapcaster Terminate is not great because I can just sack the Cursecatcher. But Snap Bolt works, even just if they have it in their hand, Terminate on one of my lords. Definitely not going to let this Tasigur eat our other lords, so let's just try to get in with Cursecatcher here for 3. Okay, so there's a Fatal Push, the first that we've seen, hitting our Master of the Pearl Trident. But in response, of course, I want to activate the AEther Vial and bring in one of these Master of Waves before I lose the devotion from the Lord. So at this point, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, including the Spreading Seas devotion. And now we can let the Island Walk Lord eat that Fatal Push. And looks like the Cursecatcher is going to get in for 2. The opponent goes down to 12, sacks their Polluted Delta on my end step to go down to 11. Gets a Watery Grave. All right. So we're doing pretty well here. Looks like the opponent just scooped at that point. They had 3 cards in hand, just a Tasigur on board. We've got access to Island Walk, a ton of elementals, and they're all going to be 3/2s if need be next turn. So super strong game 1 out of the mono blue deck against Grixis Control. They had Hand Disruption, they had Land Destruction, they had removal spells, they had a creature, and they had all their colors, but we had some really good interaction. We were able to counter the Inquisition with an earlier Cursecatcher. We had a couple Island Walk Lords. Everything ran really, really smoothly. So look away if you don't want to see the match result. I'm going to click out of this window now. So going into game 2, let's take a look at my sideboarding strategy here. So I took out the 4 Cs and my 4 AEther Vials. Now that opens up a massive amount of space to bring in really high impact spells against these kinds of control decks. I brought in my 4 sideboard sort of general counter spells, like 2 Dispels and 2 Negates. Then I have 3 pieces of Graveyard Hate with the 3 relics. And I brought in one of my 2 Dismembers to hit whatever threat they end up landing, whether it's a Creeping Tar Pit, a Gurmag Angler, or a Tasigur. Dismember is a clean answer to any of those guys. And dealing with their single threat can often, set them back a few turns or give us a few turns because, it can take them a while to reestablish another threat. So again, taking out 4 lower impact cards in the matchup. AEther Vial is vulnerable to getting 2-for-1 against Kolaghan's command, so we take that out. And the 4 Spreading Seas were already being given Island Walk by the opponent, so take out 8 lower impact cards, bring in 8 really high impact cards, 4 counterspells, 3 relics, 1 Dismember. While I'm here on my sideboard, I just want to mention the sort of common perception of Merfolk is that it kind of folds to any spot removal or any kind of removal in general. But we actually have a ton of game against these kinds of decks. Master of Waves, obviously protection from red, but especially post-board, we have a whole bunch of counterspells that, on top of the Cursecatchers, which are excellent interaction in the earlier part of the game when we're establishing a board. We've got a lot of resilience in our card draw with Silvergill. We can bounce their threats with Harbinger. And obviously they just gift us Island Walk. So even though I think somebody who doesn't know a lot about Merfolk might look at this matchup and think that the Grixis control deck has it like totally under control, I actually think that we're pretty much favored in the matchup. Not even by a little bit. It might be something, like 60-40 pretty comfortably for us. So opening hands, this is a little bit awkward because we've got Akira and only Cavern of Souls. Now, against Grixis Death Shadow recently, I had a very similar opening hand, and I made the mistake of naming Merfolk with both of my caverns because I wanted to make absolutely sure that I could cast my Island Walk Lords. The thing is, though, I run 11 basic islands and Oboro. So really the correct play to do here is name Merfolk with one of the caverns and Spirits with the other. Then as soon as I draw either an island or Oboro, all of my creatures are going to be castable and uncounterable. So we'll have Cavern plus Island for our Island Walk Lords, sort of Cavern and then whatever for Reejerey and Master of Waves, who have all of these sort of generic mana symbols, and Kira as soon as we name a Cavern on Spirit. So actually this is an easy keep against a control deck. They probably took out a bunch of their counter magic, certainly leaving in some number of cryptics because that's important for tapping our team down, but they won't be able to counter any of our creatures. Opponent mulliganed, happy to see that, but I'm pretty sure they put a card on top. Tapped Watery Grave, 5 cards in hand, feeling pretty good. And for my first turn, I drew a Relic, which is incredible. I don't have a ton of 1-drops in the deck after taking out all of my AEther Vials. But Relic, extremely good draw there. Opponent plays a tap Steam Vents, trying to protect their life total. I'm going to go ahead and name Spirit with the second Cavern. I drew a second Master of Waves for the turn, which is really nice. And yeah, not a lot I can do this turn, so I'm just going to pass also. He's hoping to hit another blue source. The opponent's passing as well. Really slow start, but my hand is developing beautifully. There's that island, and so at this point I can cast pretty much anything in my hand with the lands that I have. So great draws in the opening part of the game. I'm going to go ahead and jam Kira here. Now, against a blue-white control deck, I would play this differently because they run, especially after sideboard, pretty much a full play set of Supreme Verdicts. And we don't want Kira to get swept away by a Supreme Verdict. Now, blue-white has no hand disruption, so there's really no way that they can take the Kira out of our hand if we sort of sandbag her for the whole game. We can let them run through a Supreme Verdict or two, and then later in the game, once we have some Mutavaults and whatever we're top decking, we can slam the Kira, and now their top-decked removal spells become much less valuable because they need to use 2 to deal with Kira. However, against Grixis, they don't run as many board wipes. They could be bringing in some number of red removal, red board wipes, but they do have hand disruption, and we'd really rather them not pick her out of our hand. So getting Kira onto the board early, it's setting us up for a potentially sort of explosive win if the opponent doesn't have a very quick answer, because next turn we can play a Mutavault, play Master of Waves. We'll get 3 tokens from the 3 Devotion. The Mutavault will be getting buffed by the Master of Waves. We can play another Island Walk Lord or just another Master of Waves and close this thing out in a couple of turns. So very, very nice opening. You can see that with the Spirit, Cavern of Souls, the opponent couldn't even counter the Kira if they wanted to. Opponent cracks a fetch land, and I'm going to sort of get that out of the graveyard with the Relic. See, they get a Blood Crypt, so I'm happy to see them hitting their own life total. What are they going to play here? Kolaghan's Command doesn't really do very much right now because it could kill our Relic, but it's not going to kill Kira, and I guess they can make us discard and kill our Relic. Oh, but it's Izzet Staticaster, so if Kira is a trump card against Grixis control, Izzet Staticaster is a trump card against Kira. So this is actually a pretty cool development. It means that the opponent can pop Kira's shield very, very easily. And any of our smaller creatures, like Silvergills and Cursecatchers, are threatened now by Staticaster. So the opponent on their main phase is going to pop Kira's shield and then deal with her with a simple Lightning Bolt. So that's pretty rough from our side of the table. However, the opponent is down to 3 cards in hand, and we're keeping their graveyard really well controlled with this Relic. Okay, there's another Relic. So I think I'm going to start by activating the first Relic, see if I can get that Lightning Bolt out of the opponent's graveyard. So in response, the opponent is going to cast this Snapcaster Mage, hoping to get to cast this Lightning Bolt at my face, or alternatively, to leave it up in case I play, a creature this turn. They can then bolt it with Flashback. However, having just drawn another Relic, I can very easily just crack this first one to exile this Lightning Bolt and draw a card. Now, even if I hadn't drawn another Relic, with the opponent on 2 cards in hand, I would almost certainly cycle this Relic to make sure that the opponent doesn't have access to this Lightning Bolt. So we'll tap the Spirit land, drew an island, and the opponent is going to lose that Lightning Bolt. All right, so continuing, I'll play that Mutavault, and at this point, I had to think for a second. I thought at first about playing Reejerey, but I'd love to get this second Relic onto the table. So even though it opens me up to a blowout with Kolaghan's Command, again, the opponent is low on cards, and we've got Master of Waves to follow up with in subsequent turns. So I'm going to try to run out an Island Walk Lord and a Relic here, and just sort of cross our fingers and hope that the opponent doesn't have a Kolaghan's Command in hand. Now, again, note that I'm casting Lord of Atlantis with Cavern of Souls. If the opponent has any spell snares in their deck after sideboarding, they're dead cards. This matchup, a great example of why Cavern of Souls is such a powerful card. Opponents, okay. Collective Brutality. I thought they were tapping low for Kolaghan's Command. No other modes other than just dealing with this Island Walk Lord. I can immediately tap Relic to get rid of that Collective Brutality. And the opponent played a Creeping Tar Pit. So they've got a couple of threats between the Tar Pit and the Snapcaster Mage. It's a pretty slow clock, especially in light of what we've got in hand. They're down to 1 card. We've got a Mutavault on the table. So I feel like we're in the driver's seat right now. Harbinger is interesting because it's a way to establish some devotion with Master of Waves. And bouncing Snapcaster Mage could be correct since we have their graveyard controlled. But it's almost never correct to bounce Snapcaster Mage because they can very easily top deck like a Fatal Push. And then if I'm tapped very low and can't crack Relic, they can Fatal Push, Snapcaster, Fatal Push, which would be a bit of a blowout. So we're going to let the opponent keep Snapcaster Mage. I just have to decide whether I want to cast Reejerey and Harbinger. I could untap a land and leave mana up for Relic. Neither of those creatures are particularly vulnerable to Izzet Staticaster. or whether I want to just play out my first Master of Waves with the intention of following up with the second one. Now, the first elemental that I make would die to Staticaster, but any subsequent elementals with the second Master of Waves would all be 3/2 elementals, which would put them beyond Staticaster's reach. So I feel like Master of Waves is probably the most powerful thing we can do here. So I did think about it quite a bit, but in the end, decided to go with the Master of Waves. All right. The Master himself is protected against Izzet Staticaster. Opponent untaps and now has 2 cards in hand. It looks like they're going to try to race us here. So we'll take 5. No real problem with that. And I chose to leave the Relic up, even though I had mana there to cycle it, just because the opponent still has 2 cards in hand. And we don't really need to draw that extra card right now with the Relic. We've got plenty to do with our mana. So that land was actually okay because having 6 lands is going to let us play a Harbinger and then a Master of Waves to get extra elemental tokens. Okay, so note that I used Cavern of Souls to cast the Harbinger, again, just in case the opponent has Spell Snare that can only hit 2 drops. There's really nothing with 1 blue mana that can counter Master of Waves, so I don't need a Cavern to cast Master of Waves. I am not going to bounce the Snapcaster, but I am going to follow up with a Master of Waves. Alright, so we got 4 3/2 tokens, and Staticaster can't really do anything, so I'll swing in with Master number 1. Opponent has 3 cards in hand now. And against a control deck, 3 cards in hand means they've got to have something to interact with us. Okay, so this is a little bit weird because if they were going to cast Damnation, they should have attacked with Snapcaster. It's possible I wouldn't have blocked. Let's see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 12. 16. I mean, I have lethal even if I block the guy, but who knows? You know, I might not have blocked. Play around any piece of removal and still have lethal to attack with. But anyhow, didn't attack with Snapcaster. Following up with Damnation seems a little bit of a rookie move to me. That is going to resolve, but it's really not that big of a deal. We still have a Reejerey in hand. We still have a Mutavault. We still have a Relic. We can start chipping away at their graveyard again right now. Opponent's down to 2 cards. They're tapped really low, and that Island Walk Lord is a sight for sore eyes. It's really tempting to play out a Reejerey, play out the Lord of Atlantis, untap a land, so I have land to attack, mana to attack with Mutavault this turn. That would be 4 damage, bringing the opponent to 11, and then I'd have 10 for the following turn. Really, the clock isn't that much different if I just play 1 creature out, and we haven't seen any hand disruption this game, so it's possible they sideboarded out a bunch of their hand disruption. I'm going to play out the Merrow Reejerey. It gives us some value if we cast Merfolk in subsequent turns. And I'm not going to overextend and play out both of my lords. If I swing for 3 now, it would bring the opponent to 12. I'm going to swing for something like 5 the following turn. It's still just a couple of turns, but we see a bolt here. That's a little bit unfortunate. Opponent choosing to go after the Reejerey instead of the Mutavault. I guess that's probably correct. Opponent plays a land, and they're going to activate Creeping Tar Pit. Now we're getting to the point here where cycling Relic is actually going to help us a lot. We could definitely use an extra card. So we're racing. We were both at 13 this turn. They just dealt 3 to me. And I'm going to go ahead and draw an extra card with Relic now. Harbinger is pretty nice, and we drew 2 of them. So I think I'm going to play this Lord and just pass the turn really quick, as if I maybe forgot to activate Mutavault, or maybe I'm afraid to activate Mutavault. Maybe the opponent thinks I'm trying to block with Mutavault, and I don't know that Creeping Tar Pit is unblockable. We saw a Fatal Push on my Lord, so the opponent's on 0 cards. Okay, this is perfect because we see the Creeping Tar Pit activation. Opponent's trying to get ahead in the race, but I'm just going to bounce him with a Tar Pit, with a Harbinger. And unfortunately, they haven't made a land drop yet, so they can just play out their man land again. And it looks like they're just going to pass the turn. Now, Spell Pierce is pretty cool in this spot because they're tapping low to activate Creeping Tar Pit. So if they have another thing like a Bolt in hand or Terminate, Spell Pierce is actually going to be pretty live. For this turn, though, I'm just going to activate Mutavault and swing for 4. Okay, we've sort of edged ahead in the race for the moment. Oh, so something else this turn from the opponent. A Tasigur. So I chose not to bring in Harbinger while the opponent was tapped out. Of course, if I brought in the Harbinger, a top-decked Lord would have allowed me to swing for exactly 9 with 3, 3, and 3. But Harbinger could definitely get value with a Tasigur on the table. Island was definitely not the best draw, so we're just going to play it and pass the turn. Opponent's going to get him with this Tasigur, and we've got the Harbinger to get him off the table. So in some control matchups, we take out Harbingers, like against blue-white. We can sideboard out some number, especially since Celestial Colonnade has Vigilance. It's very rare that you'll see a tapped Celestial Colonnade activated as a creature. But against Grixis, Harbinger is an excellent card to have in the deck. So we get that Tasigur off the table. Pretty sure the opponent's going to recast that guy. But at this point, you can see that we've got that potential lethal threat established that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so the opponent chose to exile their Fatal Push to help cast Tasigur, choosing instead to leave up their red mana. So pretty strongly telegraphing that they have Lightning Bolt in hand. Now, I drew my Lord of Atlantis. I can just cast him with Cavern of Souls, no fear of counter magic. And we can see Spell Pierce is clutch on turn 11. So, sort of validating running it in the main deck. It is a very strong, very versatile card. I'm going to turn my guys sideways. The opponent thinks probably that he's about to turn the corner, because if he bolts my Lord, he can eat my Mutavault. He'll take 4, going down to 5, but I'll only have 4 power left on the board. And they can just get in the following turn with Tasigur and Creeping Tar Pit, putting me all the way down to 3, making a top-deck Lightning Bolt lethal, or even just another attack step. So here's the Lightning Bolt that they were telegraphing, and Spell Pierce is just going to close things out. All right, so that was the first round of a Modern Friendly League. Mono Blue Merfolk against Grixis Control. As I mentioned, I think a lot of people who don't really know Merfolk that well would just assume that the matchup is a blowout in favor of Grixis Control. But we've got tons of tools to effectively fight them, and you saw pretty much all the angles. You saw counter magic, you saw Harbinger even coming into play, bouncing Tasigur, bouncing Creeping Tar Pit, Mutavault getting in on the action, dodging Damnation. So yeah, just really strong, relatively straightforward 2-0 win against Grixis Control. Master of Waves did a great job. I've been loving running the playset of that guy. Let me know your thoughts on the match. Please let me know if you have any questions. Check out the link to my Patreon page if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next video for round 2. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.